Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Becoming You podcast. And today I wanted to share with you two real life examples from my own life about the price of making mistakes, especially with our kids. So what I mean by that is we often talk about the price of mistakes, like what does it cost us when we make a mistake, right? But I think we often fail to realize like how much what kind of a gift there is in mistakes that our kids make. We're often very quick to prevent our children from making mistakes, to protect them from their own mistakes, and giving them as much advice and life experience as necessary to protect them from failing, from making mistakes. But what I have been really challenging myself to do is to allow my kids to make as many mistakes as possible within, as long as it doesn't affect them physically or in a very adversely mental way, right? But allowing them to make as many mistakes as possible and allowing them to take the lead on making those mistakes, right? So they can learn lessons from it. So let me start off by saying that this is really a tenet of conscious parenting and gentle parenting. Because behind conscious and gentle parenting, you're driven by a different set of values to traditional parenting. Traditional parenting really works on a hierarchical system. There is a lot of power that the parents have that the kids do not have. It's driven by punishment, driven by discipline. It's driven by like more validity given to the parents than the kids. Like, you are less experienced than I am. You have spent less time on this earth than I have. So I know more. So therefore, I get more of a right to say what happens in this relationship and with you than you do, right? So in traditional parenting, the amount of agency that a child has is very, very little. And the relationship is driven through fear and conditioning. And fear doesn't have to be like, standing over your child where the child's shaking. That's not the kind of fear I'm talking about, but really extrinsic fear of, if, instead of being driven by their own internal guidance system to make the right decisions for them, it's really driven by what will my parents think, and I have to do something that pleases them, that won't upset them, right? That's really the model of traditional parenting. Whereas with conscious and gentle parenting, you really take on this idea that kids are equals to us, right? That's very difficult for a lot of people to understand in traditional parenting, that our kids are equals. And you are a guide, and you're really a guide to them, right? Not somebody looking down upon them, shaming them into and conditioning them into doing things a certain way. So you are first their guide, and then you're their mentor, and then you're the friend, right? And so parenting really takes on three different roles, instead of like, maybe not a mentor, you're like their teacher, right? And teachers, hopefully a good teacher, does not teach through shaming. If this was a traditional school environment, and if your child came home every day complaining that a teacher is being mean to them, we would go to the school system and do something about that teacher, making your child feel unsafe, feeling intimidated, and making them feel not good enough, right? And I can speak from personal experience. My child did have a teacher like that, where she made my son feel so scared that he refused to go to school, and we were starting to see behavioral issues, right? But we don't think about, as parents at home, what kind of a teacher am I at home? How am I teaching them life lessons? Am I shaming them? Am I instilling fear in them? Am I intimidating them, right, when they make mistakes? So this episode was really inspired by how am I balancing the conflict that I face within myself, which is a part of me that recognizes my children as whole human beings with their own set of values, and I do not want to drive my agenda on them, right? There's that part of me. But then there's also the part of me that wants to do things the traditional way, that it would be so much easier and less time consuming and less frustrating if my kids would just do what I wanted them to do, right? If they just behaved in ways to make me feel good and comfortable and reaffirm my own belief of how life works, right? I put in X, you get Y. And my kids like don't necessarily want to follow that, right? But with traditional parenting, I can enforce it. But in now that I follow the values of gentle parenting and conscious parenting, I really have a hard time acting in those ways. So example number one, right? Yesterday, my kids really wanted to go see the new Spider-Verse Spider-Man movie. And I can think of far better ways to spend a Sunday afternoon than doing that. But because I'm the good parent that I am, I agreed to. Let me just take a sip of my coffee right here. So we agreed to do it. And, we had quite a lot of time during the day leading up to the movie time. And my kids, get 2 hours of screen time over the weekend, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. So my eldest, I forget the reason, he did not have access to screen time in the morning, which I forget why. It was a consequence of something. And so we were going to have lunch, and then there was about an hour of time before we had to head out to the movie. And so he sat down to watch the movie. I think my youngest was out playing with somebody. Yeah, he went to a friend's house to play. And he came back with about 30 minutes before we had to leave to the movies, and he hadn't had lunch yet. So I fed him lunch, and now there was about 10 minutes to go. And my son, my oldest, had been watching TV maybe by 30 minutes at this point, and my youngest said, "Can I get on screen time?" And I was like, "Sure, there's like 10 minutes to go. Why not?" And the time came and we had to leave for the movies. And so I said, "Boys, it's time. We got to go to the movies." And they both went, "Okay, let me just turn it off." And then they didn't. Minutes passed by, and then they still hadn't turned it off. And I was starting to get upset at this point because I had already spent the money to book these tickets. I didn't even want to go to this movie, right? I would have rather worked in my garden or gone for a walk or something. But I said, okay, because my boys wanted to go. And now the responsibility fell on me to chase them into the car. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done doing this work of constantly worrying about getting them somewhere on time, right? It's the unspoken emotional labor of motherhood, of parenting. It's the mental load we carry of the million things that we need to do, not only for ourselves, for our jobs, for our careers, for our house, and for our kids. It is exhausting. So at this point, I just thought, you know what? This isn't even important to me. They wanted this. And I thought, I'm not going to rush them. I'm not going to remind them. They both heard me because they acknowledged me and they said, yes, okay, we'll turn it off. I'd done my part. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to let this go. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to veg out until they realize what time it is. And so we were supposed to leave at 2 p.m. because the movie was at 2:30. And 2:30 came and went. I'd been sitting on that couch for about 20 minutes. And after 2:30, I started to get antsy because I'm like, what if they watch TV the whole time and we missed the whole movie? I was like, that's $50 down the drain. And then the other side of me said, well, that's $50 well spent for them to learn a very valuable lesson. But that side of me wasn't super loud. But it was a part of me that kept saying, you're going to lose $50. Just remind them, just give them one reminder. That's all it's going to take. So I was sitting with my discomfort for a long time. And I lasted, 20 plus another 20 minutes. So by the time, I couldn't go I wish I'd lasted longer, but I waited a whole 40 minutes before I told them, hey guys, do you know what time it is? And my oldest was like, yeah, it's 2:50. And I was like, yeah, do you know what time the movie starts? And he was like, oh my God, it's 2:30. And he started turning things off. And I could tell immediately that he was super upset because his voice was angry and shaky at the same time. And then he started yelling at his little brother, telling him that it was his fault when it was neither. But it was, they were both equally responsible because neither one had turned it off, right? one of them could have taken responsibility, turned it off, and said the other one, let's go, but neither one did. But they had this habit, I don't know whether your kids do, of blaming each other for whatever's gone wrong. Right? And so we got to the movie and they missed probably about the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, but they still stood in line to get their popcorn and their snacks and everything else because I gave them another option. And I said, we can always skip the snack line and we can go straight in, but they both wanted their popcorn. So obviously I know now where their priorities lie. But, after the movie, after my son, one of my kids was super upset on the way there, crying that he'd missed the start and how could he have been so distracted that he didn't even think to turn it off. So after the movie was done, and I said, what did you guys learn from today? And they both said, we just need to turn it off next time when you tell us to, especially when we're going to important things like this. And yes, it registered, but again, only time will tell. So am I going to do this again? Probably yes, because for kids, it takes many, many, many times to learn the lesson, right? And there's nothing wrong. It's not like they're broken or lazy, but it's just, even for adults, it takes many times to learn these lessons. But I was really proud of myself that I kind of sort of stuck to my guns. I wish I hadn't said anything, but my discomfort got the better of me. And I didn't want to waste $50 down the drain. And I think this was a valuable lesson for them. And I don't know that they've learned the lesson completely, but they're at least halfway there. And for me, it was worth it, right? So this is what I mean by allowing our kids to make mistakes and getting the prize from it, because this is something that I don't think they'll forget anytime in the near future. And the next, weeks, months, when I tell them it's time to go, especially when they're vested in it, right? It's not always, sometimes it's something that's important to mom that we need to go for, and they might not be vested in it, so it might not as work. But when it's things to do with them, like their activities, their friends, their movie night, let's go somewhere to, their lessons, they're going to be in that car because on time with a single reminder, because I have helped them make a mistake in order to learn the lesson. Allowing them to make mistakes in a safe, non-judgmental way helps our kids learn lessons when you don't shame them, right? It's really important that we don't shame them. I told you so. See, this is what you get for not listening. I didn't say any of those words yesterday because the entire value of the lesson would have been lost in the shame, right? When we say, I told you so, even if we say it in a very joking way, what it creates is shame in our children. And so anything that we're trying to help them learn falls by the wayside, and all they remember is the feeling of shame from that. I'm a bad person. Something's wrong with me. How could I not know this? And so if we want our kids to learn valuable lessons and help in a positive way, right? It really requires self-reflection. You want them to gather the lessons for themselves with the help of you, asking them the right questions. So what did you learn from this today? What could you have done differently? What would you do the same again? How did it feel? Right? These are all questions that we can ask and just stand back and help them figure it out. And kids often might say, I don't know. That's a thing that kids often say, but they always know. They always know. What they struggle with is articulating it, right? Just like you. My coach always says, you have the answers. And I hate it when she says that, but she is right. It is a process to get to the answer, but the answers are always within me. And just like that, the answers are always within your kids. And as a conscious, gentle parent, it is our job to ask the right questions and help them guide them to their right answers. All right. So practical example number 2 of how, allowing conscious, gentle parenting works practically, and the prize in mistakes. So my son has a talent show coming up. He heard about it through, school, It is at school. And he said, I want to sign up. And in the last few years, we've asked him, he has had no interest. And this year, I was like, I'm not going to ask. And he came and said, I want to sign up. I was like, well, isn't that interesting? So we signed up and I said, what's your talent going to be? He doesn't have one specific thing that stands out because he doesn't really take voice lessons or music lessons or dance lessons or anything like that. And he landed on, I want to perform dance. And I said, okay. So we picked up a song, except I have no experience in choreography. And the few times we practiced, he was just coming up with something just like you would do on a dance floor at a wedding, right? And so I asked him, how would you feel if I was to find somebody to come teach you for an hour and to help you put together some steps for the music that we have picked out? And he said, okay, he was on board with that. So she came last weekend and, taught him for an hour. He learned it. She also video recorded herself. And so we have a copy of it on our phone that my son can use at any time to practice. So one entire week has gone by and he has practiced maybe 5 minutes out of the 7 days, right? And during the middle of the week, I found myself nagging, which I hated myself for, reminding him like 5, 6, 7 times over the evening or whatever. Not only just reminding him to practice, but kept reminding him about what are the consequences? Like, I want you to get up on stage and I want you to feel good. Why aren't you practicing? Like, let me come sit with you. You do know that, the talent show is in 6 days, right? I was a nag, you guys. And he just finally had it and he snapped at me and he goes, I know, you can stop telling me, right? This was me not gentle parenting. And I felt really bad and I apologized. And I said, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry for nagging you. And I took responsibility. And I went away and I self-reflected and I asked myself, why are you acting the way you are? Why is this more important to you than it is to him? And I came up with 2 reasons. One was I was scared of my son failing, right? The last thing I want for him is to freeze on stage or do a mediocre performance or forget his steps halfway through and be really embarrassed and then be scarred for life. I just, in general, didn't want him to fail, right? So my fear of failure was driving my behavior towards him and making him feel bad. So on the surface level, it is masked as, I just want my son to be at his best, right? I want him to really push himself hard and put in the work so that he can be excellent. And that all sounds really well-meaning and well-intentioned, right? But ultimately, that is a disguise for what's really driving it, which is the fear of, I don't want him to fail because he might not be able to handle it. And then I have to pick up the pieces and I don't want to handle it, right? So let me push him to practice in a way that doesn't feel good to him, right? This is how, your ego works, right? It never says you are disciplining him or, gently guiding him to change your kid's actions because it's coming from a place of fear. Your ego will never say that. Your ego will always come from a place of, I just want the best for him, right? And yes, we all want the best for us. But if we really, really looked deep into that intention of we just want what's best for our kids, what's best for our kids is really allowing them to make their own decisions. That's really what's best for them. But your ego says what's best for your child is to be spectacular on stage, right? That's not what's best for our child. You see how the ego works and it's in disguise? So I realized, this is coming from my own fear of failure. I don't want him to experience the feeling of I'm not good enough, which might happen, which might not. Again, that's all projection, right? He might get off that stage and I might look at his performance as, oh man, that sucked. And he might be like, wow, I did really good, Mom. I'm really proud of myself given how much I practiced, right? In one of those cases, I am judging what's a good outcome for him to turn out to be this confident person. I believe that his confidence would be boosted If he put in lots and lots of work up front and perform spectacularly on stage, that's going to give him more confidence, right? I've already presumed that, but I don't know whether that's actually true and that whether that's actually what's best for his journey. I am not humble enough to recognize that maybe there's a different way, there's a better way, which is for him to fail. And maybe he picks up the pieces and comes out stronger and more confident in that way. But our fear of failure immediately masks that as a viable option. It says, nope, that is not the way we want to go through. So we do these things called nagging, which actually disconnects us from our children and makes them feel bad, right? And the second thing of what I realized upon self-reflection was that when I was young, used to perform a lot on stage. I acted, I always signed up for school plays, almost always got the lead parts. I did a lot of like costume shows in India growing up. They would call them fancy dresses, right? They had these kids competitions where you'd come in costume as something and they would judge you and you'd win prizes. I used to do a lot of group dancing on stage. So I loved performing. And as a kid growing up, like I wasn't a very good looking kid or pretty girl. And so I never got attention for how pretty I was. But when I was on stage, like I got attention. People would always tell me, wow, you're such a great dancer. Wow, you were so good at acting, right? This role. And I felt the confidence on stage that I didn't feel off stage. So the inner child in me really wanted my son to have that same experience. I was used to having my needs met for uniqueness, confidence, specialness, etc. Like I was seen. My need for being seen happened when I was on stage. And so my inner child was familiar with that. And so she kept driving me, the adult self, to make my son practice because she wanted him to have the same experience that she did. Because if you didn't do well on stage, then she feared that she was left with nothing. And that was an wow aha moment for me. I was like, oh my gosh, now I get it. Now I get why him performing at his best is so important to me. So when I recognized it, then I could let it go. I could step away from it and not have it control me. This is the importance of self-awareness. When we understand why we do the things that we do and what's driving it, we immediately have more control over it and we have compassion, and therefore we can kind of take it, lessen how much it's driving us. The minute the light goes on and you can see what's in the room, we can choose whether we pick up those things or not, right? That's the metaphor I'm choosing to use today. So my light went on and I realized what my inner child was doing. And as soon as I recognized that, I was able to help her put it down. I was like, it's okay. It's okay. This is his thing. We don't have to drive it. This is not our thing. And so all of that happened. I was so proud of myself. I stopped nagging and we came upon an agreement. We talked about it together. And I said, look, I don't want to be a nag, but I had to do my job. And sometimes as a kid, you get distracted because you get busy with friends, and as a child, like you don't really keep track of time. Time is not important to you. So would it help if I asked you once a day, would you like to practice, and we set aside a time? And he said yes. So we came up with every day what those times were going to be. And during those times, I'd remind him, but he still didn't practice, right? But I did my job as a parent, being a guide, right? So I did my part. And when he said, no, I don't want to practice, internally, I would groan. And I tried my best to not show it on my face, which I don't know that I was successful or not, but I would just let it go. That would be it. So then last night, there was another huge meltdown, not regarding to the dance. It was unrelated. But at the end of the night, when the meltdown was happening and he was crying and talking about everything, at the end of the meltdown, it came out. He said, oh my gosh, I have not practiced. I'm so stressed. I'm not ready. I don't know why I'm not practicing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he recognized that he was unprepared. And he said, I'm scared that I'm not going to nail it tomorrow, meaning the dress rehearsal. And the words came out of my mouth before I could even stop myself. And I said, you're right, you're not going to nail it. And he exploded and he goes, what kind of a mother are you? You don't even believe in me. And when he said that, I felt really, really bad. And I was like, I realized how that might have landed and how that it might have come across. But after he'd calmed down a little bit and I'd helped him emotionally regulate himself, right? I did not immediately go into defense mode and say like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant. No, you're going to be great. Like I didn't go there because I realized like he was in an emotional state. He was not ready to hear any of that. So I just calmly sat there and I breathed and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I could tell until his breathing became a little bit more regulated. Like he was very like short and shallow and heavy before when we were having this conversation. And then once I heard the heaviness go away and his breathing got back to some sort of normal. And I said, you know what? I'm really sorry for what I said. I said, I do believe in you, but, and then I went on to explain, I also want to be honest with you. He said, you have not practiced. So you may struggle tomorrow. You may forget your steps. But I do absolutely believe in you, right? You have what it takes to be a spectacular performer, but that is not going to happen without you putting in the work. And that's okay. You have not been putting in the work, and that's also okay. So I wanted to walk this balance of not tooting his horn for the sake of false confidence, right? Like I never want to do that to my child. I always want to be in integrity, but I also don't want to be harsh with them. And I was really proud of how I handled that conversation because it was a balance between being honest, loving, and also communicating to my child that I absolutely do believe in them, but their belief in themselves and their work ethic is more important than anything. That is what drives the results, and that he's in full control of it, right? And so yesterday night, we came up with an agreement on he has one more day left, right? Today, Monday, as I record this, Monday evening is the dress rehearsal. And so we had Monday morning before school and Monday evening after he comes back from school before we have to go to the dress rehearsal. That's a couple of hours. So we made a plan. And immediately another one snuck in, which was he has his whole outfit picked out and his sweatshirt. He wants to like put some decorations on his sweatshirt and stuff. And I realized that again, some patterns were happening with him, which is avoidance of the dance practice, right? He finds other interesting things, fun things to do before dance practice. And I had so much empathy for him in this moment because I could recognize when I do that in my own work, right? When it comes to things that are hard or complicated or overwhelming in my work, I avoid and procrastinate all day long. And so I had so much compassion for him. And this morning when he woke up, I said, okay, buddy, this is the plan we came up with. Are you ready to execute? And sure enough, he went off and decorated his sweatshirt. He spent time looking at some videos on my phone. Did he practice? No, he did not. He had about 10 to 15 minutes before school today. And he could have used that time to practice the dance multiple times. And I let it go. I did not say a word. And my husband, God bless his soul, he was not here all day yesterday when all this drama went down. And he's still more on the traditional parenting spectrum. I'm further along on the journey, but he has come a long way, which I'm so proud of him for. He was doing the same thing that I was doing a few days ago of nagging. Like he was like, hey, isn't it time to practice? Hey, do you want my phone to watch the video? Hey, like you got to get ready to do this thing. And I had to keep reminding him. I was like, just let it go. It's okay. Just let it go. It's okay. And my son did not end up practicing this morning at all. And I realized he's avoiding practicing because he's a little bit of a perfectionist. This is starting to become clearer for me. he is a little bit of a perfectionist. And when you dance practice, right, you forget the steps sometimes, you don't get the timings right. There's a lot of things that go wrong when you're practicing a dance and you haven't perfected anything, right? Not just dance, music piece, whatever it is, when you're new to it. He doesn't like the feeling that comes with failing. He doesn't like the feeling that comes from making mistakes. And he wants to do something and he wants to do it right the very first time. He doesn't like the idea of falling short. And so the not practicing dance comes from wanting to avoid those emotions. That's why he keeps putting it off. I realized that today. It's taken me this long. It's taken me a few weeks to figure it out and put all the pieces in place. So that's the deeper work that it needs to happen, right? So I wanted to talk to him and bring some self-awareness of what I'm seeing. And we stepped out today to walk to school. And I said, I would really like to talk about what happened this morning. I said, are you open to it? Normally, I would just launch into the talk, right? And today I was like, you know what? Maybe he doesn't want to talk about it. Like, I'm going to ask him whether he wants to talk about it. And he said, no, I don't want to talk about it. Oh, that felt hard for me because I was like, I want to talk about it. I want to tell you all the things you need to know about yourself. But I held myself back and I said, okay, all right, we won't talk about it. And we just walked in silence and we talked about other things. So two things were happening inside of me in that moment. The fearful part of me, my ego, was like, oh, this is not good. He's not going to learn the lesson unless you don't talk about it, right? But again, that's driven by my need, by my agenda. And I was like, nope, he's old enough to decide what he wants to talk about. Just let it go. And then the other part of me was so proud because in that moment, I realized that I was a parent who was seeing her child and who was honoring her child's needs, even though I may not agree with it. And I let it go. So this evening, we shall see what happens, whether he comes home and practices or not, and how I act as a parent, driven by my own fears and by my own needs for my child to be something that I want him to be, that he necessarily may not want to be. And he may fail spectacularly on dress rehearsal night. He may fail spectacularly on the actual night of the event. And he may want to quit. He's mentioned that once or twice, but we've talked it through. I haven't said, no, you can't quit, right? I have talked through the options of what would it feel like if you quit? What would it feel like if you kept going, right? What would make you feel good as a person? What would make you feel better about yourself? Which choice, right? Both choices are hard. So that's the kind of conversation that I want to have with my child. And he might think, him not practicing and me pushing him, me not pushing him to practice might turn out to be a big mistake. We might all fall flat on our faces and have a lot of things to deal with. But that is the beauty of helping our children learn some very valuable lessons in a very practical way. Because if the latter were to happen, right, which is for me and my husband to get on his case, to nag him, and we make him practice, right, and he performs spectacularly, we run the risk, it's guaranteed that we risk alienating the relationship that we have with our child, because every time we nag and we force him to do something that he does not want to do, it's going to create distance because he's going to feel like I'm not seen, I'm not heard. This version of me that does not practice is unwanted, right? There's something wrong with me. That is the signal that we will send every time we have an argument and force my child to do something that he's not willing to do. Now, a lot of you might disagree with this because you might say, well, he's the one who signed up, so he really needs to show up for it. Yeah, he does need to show up for it, but he's the one who signed up, so he's the one that is going to want to intrinsically do this, not because some external force is making him do it, but because there's a love for dance, there's a love for performance. And if we get our own way this time and get him to what we think is an acceptable place, that he's put in enough work, etc., one, we could turn his love, whatever's blossoming inside of him right now, we could completely kill that right? What if I kill the love for performing forever because of this singular experience of how horrible it was? That one time I signed up, they would not stop talking about me practicing. That put me off forever, and I've just never danced ever again. I would hate for that to happen. I would hate for my behavior to be the reason for his decision to never get on a public stage again. I'm being extreme. I know I'm being facetious. But these are the kind of experiences that get embedded in our bodies as kids that then drive our future behavior, right? I'm not saying this will cause him to not be able to publicly speak again, but it will come out in other ways. And he might be sitting in a life coaching chair or a therapy chair at some point in the future and be like, oh, I never realized that my X, Y, and Z, this unhelpful behavior that I have right now, is a result of what happened when I was 9 years old. And that one time my parents just forced me to get on a stage, not forced me to practice, and just would not stop nagging me about it, right? There's going to be plenty of instances and lots of fodder for him to discuss with therapists and life coaches in the future, because that's just life, right? It's just life. We all have baggage, no matter how perfect a parent we try to be. Our kids will always have baggage, just like we all will always have baggage, because through baggage is how we grow and become more of ourselves. But I don't want to knowingly cause harm and damage and distance and disconnection and shame for my child because I'm projecting my own wounds and needs and taking on this role of I know best. I really want to be my children's guide first, teacher next, and friend third, right? And so I really am helping myself learn the value in making mistakes. And what better way and what better time to help our kids make mistakes at such an early age and learn from them, right? Because when they make mistakes at this age, the consequences are far, far less than making those mistakes when they are, in high school years, teenage years, young adult years. They will still make mistakes, but the more mistakes we help them learn from now and help them realize that mistakes are not life and death, that it's okay to make mistakes all day long, that mistakes are just an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and to learn what's of value to us and what's not. Through this mistake, he might learn, hey, like X is not a value of mine, and align himself more, right, in another direction. So in order for this to happen, in order for you to guide your children in this way, guess what? You have to change your own relationship with mistakes. You've got to stop looking at mistakes as good and bad, as right and wrong, and terrible and excellent. You got to stop making it such a black and white area and just allowing mistakes for what they are, which is, oh, this is not the right way to do it for me. Let me figure out what is the right way to do it for me. So there's so much prize to be had from mistakes, not only for you, but also for your children as well. So encourage mistakes, be open to them, be receptive to them, and really try to find the gold in all of these mistakes that your kids are making so that they feel safe with you. All right. I love you guys so much. And a final reminder that this is the last week to enroll in the Grounded Parent. If you loved this podcast episode and found yourself leaning in and thinking, I really want to be more like this. This sounds way better than the way I'm parenting right now. I would love to invite you to join the Grounded Parent program. This is exactly what you're going to be learning inside of it on how to become a conscious, calm, grounded parent that is creating an extremely safe environment and deep emotional connection with your children. You can find out the details more by clicking on the show notes. And we kick off this Friday, June 9th in the program. So I cannot wait to see you in there. If you're really interested in this program and you want to know more beyond what's on the details of the webpage, please email me or DM me. I would love to chat with you and really help you figure out, is this the right next step for me? All right. I love you guys so much. Take care. Bye.